make sure that you're clear that in your role, we don't expect you to do every single thing as it pertains to assisting with the EHR implementation and the training plans. We want to make sure that you're communicating frequently with your EVP and the divisional leadership team so that, one, they're informed of the training plan status and the other elements. So when you're talking about computer hardware issues, they have some idea of this. We want to make sure that when they're all getting together as an executive team, that some things aren't completely brand new to them when we share it with them. So there should be some two-way dialogue going on in the division from you to them. And while we recognize that that may be happening here, we really want to highlight that it should be happening pretty frequently. So as we start to get into the meat of implementation, the conversation should start to ramp up. So again, they're coming together Friday the 13th at 1 o'clock. So you want to make sure prior to that meeting, you've informed them of the training plan and shared it with them to make sure that they're clear on the progress that you've made so far. Also, if you haven't done it by now, you want to make sure that you all have a system or a process whereby you can have ongoing and consistent two-way communication about where we are. Some of the feedback that we've, as the EHR project team, have been able to process and digest somewhat centers around the impression that, again, the EHR is something that's happening to the divisions for the divisions. We want to make sure that it feels like it's happening with the divisions and that the divisional leadership team and the EVP feel part of the plan that's being put together for implementation and for training. So you want to make sure that you impress upon them that the training plan creation and delivery is a unified divisional effort in partnership with the EHR project team. So I just want to pause and make sure that that's clear and see if you have any questions on that. Have you all been having regular communication meetings with the EVPs or with your specific EVP and divisional leadership team?
This is Cynthia. We haven't had regular meetings, but we did have a meeting last week where we talked about our training plan and on it in the meeting on the 5th.
Okay, perfect. So Northeast is cleared, and you all will start to at least discuss what a regular communication.
This is the South, Charlotte. We basically have a divisional meeting every Monday, so at that time we inform not only the EVP but the rest of the divisional leadership team of the status.
Okay, good. Midwest. James, can you hear me okay?
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, we've been meeting on a regular basis, and we're meeting again this week.
Okay, and we've been discussing through the monthly meetings, and Jesse, Philadelphia Behavioral Health and Housing, so communications with Sandy at the administration meetings, and freely at your desk because you all sit pretty close by. Okay, so back to kind of the New England, recognize that there's some opportunity to get up to speed with where we are with that division since it's kind of newly been incorporated. Okay, do you think you will be able for this Friday, just so that the EVP at least has the materials or access to the materials and know you've accomplished to date, so that they can speak intelligently about that on Friday? Okay. And then, yes. Okay. Perfect. So again, just make sure that they have that information. Jesse, we'll come back to the question you have about whether it's a one-day training, 1.5 day, or 3-day training. We'll come back to that question, but we'll keep it in there. Okay. So In terms of the training plan, pretty quickly means, if you can, identifying the training location or training space options. So what's available? You don't have to make any reservations just yet if it's something outside of an RHD space within a program or division, but you want to have some options available around where training could be held. So as a general rule, and this might help answer your question a little bit, Jesse, as a general rule, you will likely need probably at minimum 2 days of training, from whether it's 9 to 5 or 9:30 to 4:30. So you want to think about space that can be utilized for a whole day if the training were to take place over 2 days, 3 days, maybe kind of at the max, which is just a general ballpark. So when you identify that training location space, you want to also identify how many learner stations or seats can fit in that training space. This will give you an idea of how many the class can hold. We can always talk about what's the ideal number to have in the class, but that also factors into the skill of the trainer, since a lot of the training will be delivered by e-learning. If you have a space that can hold a lot of people, say 25, we might suggest that in addition to the lead trainer, you also have someone else in the room that can help answer questions and serve from a technical assistance standpoint if people have questions during the e-learning or some challenges. But you want to find out what space could you use and how many stations are in that space. That's going to help identify exactly how many computers are needed for that training space. So the number of computers should equal the number of learner stations. So for example, if you were identifying space at a local community center and the space holds 14 seats, and you know you already have 3 laptops within your division or program that could be used, then you know that you'll need 11 more laptops. Okay, and likely maybe 1 for the trainer, so 12. So that's the kind of math we want to start to see shape up. Where can you have training? How many stations, learner stations, can fit into that training space? And then how many computers, likely laptops, desktops are difficult, how many laptops can fit in that training space? What the IT or BTS group is able to start processing now is procuring those laptops for training. So the sooner you can identify points 1 and 2 on this slide, the sooner you can get that number to BTS and we can start getting the laptops ordered, because they also have to be configured with the specifications that are needed for training. Now again, you can use laptops or desktops for the training, provided that they have the hardware specifications that are required. So if you already have a classroom that has desktops in it, that's suitable, provided those desktops meet the hardware requirements.
What is, are those going to be on loaned units, and how much will it cost?
So we can talk about the cost with BTS and maybe get a ballpark. I know they have a couple of options that they've indicated are probably suitable, but the cost, if you are looking to procure them and keep them, would be incurred by the division. So if you wanted to just get some that were on loan, I think that's a conversation we can broker with BTS around what that would look like. But any of the costs associated with procuring computers for training is a cost that's incurred by the divisions. Now we are looking at identifying training space here at Corporate Office Philadelphia that could be used and shared across the programs and divisions that are regionally close and the employees that are regionally close to this office. So that's something that Brittany and I are going to work out with Todd and Mark and BTS around setting up space here. So that's a task that I'm taking on to kind of move forward with. So as I know more about that, I can communicate that. So that particular training space we're actually working to identify presently. We have a couple of options, but not many. We had a question before around the internet connectivity requirement, and Mark Chandler from BTS indicated that you should have at minimum 25 megabits per second hardware wireless connectivity, and you don't need more than 50 megabits per second. So if you already have a computer training room, RHD space somewhere, you can look on your internet provider's bill and find out what internet connectivity capacity you already have. If you're looking at space outside of an RHD space and somewhere else, this is a question that you want to ask of the individuals that kind of own or oversee that space around connectivity. So we can, let me take a look at some of the chat questions. Cynthia, is there any chance that 2 learners can share 1 laptop? Unfortunately not. We will likely have learners enroll in the courses that are applicable to them in terms of the e-learning classes, because not everybody's going to necessarily need the exact same things depending on role or service line. And so they have to be individually at their own laptop to take the e-learning. 2 people can't take 1 e-learning. We can't track that, and it doesn't allow for an effective learner experience. So we have to individually train each employee and test their knowledge on what they learned. So they cannot share laptops. Okay, another question. Did I say that I'm trying to reserve room here at Central for all of training deployment? If yes, what is the process about sharing the room between Mid-Atlantic and the Behavioral Health and Housing Divisions and IDD? So let me clarify. We're not looking to provide in this area. What we're trying to do is identify space what's identified by the divisions regionally close to here. So the space will not accommodate every single employee that's regionally close. We will come up with a system that allows for the sharing of that space across the divisions that don't have to be heavily coordinated with us. So it'll be a partnership, but it won't provide training for everyone. Okay, it'll just in this region. But each division needs to identify its own training location and space resources. This would just be an additional one. Okay. Amanda said, was it 2 days per end user? Roughly. We don't want to overload a lot to take in and process and digest. So if long, I'll tell you they met with another company that did an EHR implementation, and just for their administrative staff, receptionists, and their staff that took patient registrations and orders, they were in training for 4 days. And so when we think about training, how individuals learn information, so we want to make sure people have enough time to go through the system and explore how it works, test their knowledge, and take the learning. So to think that it would happen in just a few hours to learn the entire system, so they need time to get in the system, learn it, understand how it works, ask questions, go through exercises and simulations to process what they've learned. We want to also make sure there's guides so that when the training is over, they have something to refer to on the job. But 2 days is probably on the lower end, and we're trying to be realistic. So we just want to give you an average to go by, roughly 2 days. And once we have all of the training developed, we can give you the exact specifications on how long it's going to take, kind of per user role. Any other questions about that or the training plan status? Okay, so will divisional trainers be attending training in PA? Yes, we will have the train the trainer sessions here at Corporate Office Philadelphia. It will be likely divisional trainers smart in the system and have those divisional train e-learning so that they take it before they start facilitating classes where the end user is taking the training. Brittany and I are also going to work to provide some content around adult learning principles and classroom management best practices. So we want to couple what they get during Train the Trainer from two ways. The technical side, how does the system work, which NetSmart will deliver, and then what are the best practices for that? And that's the side that the EHR project team and Brittany and I will work to deliver.
Have we finalized the dates for the Train the Trainer?
Not yet. They will likely not happen in February or early March, but not yet. We're still working on that piece of it.
You said they most likely will, or they will not happen?
Will not. So I think we were originally scheduled for like end of February, early from that. The system is still in the process of being built, and so to deliver Train the Trainer, we have to have the system done and completely built and ready for that. So we're working with NetSmart to identify an ideal time frame for those.
Okay.
All right. As soon as we have that nailed down, we will let you know, but it likely will not be into February, early March. The other question is around with the e-learning training that's in Cornerstone, is there a way for the independent contractors to take the e-learning since Cornerstone doesn't allow non-employees to use it at this time? So we're meeting with Brittany Restilla and Amy Mills from our training and education team around some alternatives and what can we possibly do in the system of Cornerstone itself that won't be so costly to give independent contractors a way to take the courses via e-learning. So we're exploring those options, I believe next week, so that we have a way to address the independent contractor training that also needs to happen. So what we'd like you to do is to identify truly how many independent contractors you have and by name, and at least start to get a head count now so we get an idea of how many people we're talking about. But we're working with some internal resources now to figure out what are our options for that. So that is on our radar. Okay, any other questions? Okay. So the training space, this point number 2, do you all feel comfortable having something nailed down by the end of the week, even if it's just at least? And you can enter it in chat if that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this is the South Division. We have multiple options. The difficulty is with availabilities, and some of ours are with universities, so the summer was helpful. So that's our challenge, is really knowing whether or not something's available to us is kind of contingent on dates.
Right, so not so much the availability just yet of reserving the space, but do you have options to reach out to when it's time to say we'd like to reserve space? So when we give you the dates of when training kind of should be occurring, we don't want you then to start the process of trying to figure out where it's going to happen. We want you to be able to say, hey, we have potential space at Tulane or Xavier or somewhere else that you can kind of tap to see if it could be reserved for a certain date. So right now we're just trying to get an idea of what are all the options that are available, and then when we know dates, you can go to those individuals, those representatives of that space to say, here are some dates, what can you do? So now you're kind of shopping around what can be reserved, but you already know what your options are.
Got it, thanks.
Right, so that's where we are. You don't have to reserve anything, just what are all of the options that are available to you to train employees. Okay, so another quick point I want to make about the trainers is that the trainers are going to be trained in the system. The system will contain the clinical side and the billing side, so your trainer will need to understand both sides of that system so that they can train on it. So there can be some flexibility on which trainers you'd like to do which parts, but it would be good that one trainer or the trainers can train individuals on both sides. And again, when we talk about the clinical side and the billing side, a lot of the meat of how to use the system is going to be delivered via e-learning. But your trainer should be able to help inform the clinical staff and the billing staff how best to use the system and how their workflow and their processes are now different or new because of using the EHR system. So your trainer should be well informed. Whether they come from the clinical side or the billing side, they should know both sides of the system. Does that make sense? And if you'd like to have a couple of people from the billing side, service trainers, that's fine too. So these are some of the questions you want to start to kind of get some answers to and flush out when you're selecting individuals to be trainers. Okay, another question from Amanda. So would this also apply to temps, nursing, and otherwise? Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean? Do you mean contractors or just temporary employees? Anybody
I was talking about the independent contractor issue because we have temps that come in like Delta T, and we have nursing temps that rotate in and out kind of at a moment's notice.
Okay.
So frequently have to get those people trained, and we may not know until the afternoon that we need them that evening. So we'll have to figure that out, but that's not uncommon. You know.
So a couple of things. If those temps are, if they've ever used any of your forms in the past when they provided service, all right, somebody's phone isn't on mute. Have ever used the forms, thanks. If the temps have ever used the forms in the past or documented any information, those forms will now be in Avatar. So if they still have to document in Avatar, then they need training. The best way to distinguish the employees that have access to Cornerstone and will have access to the e-learnings from individuals like independent contractors and temps is whether or not they have an employee ID number. So some temporary individuals might actually be employees, temporary employees, in which case if they have an employee ID number, then they're in Cornerstone already. If they do not have an employee ID number, they should be considered an independent contractor and listed kind of on your running list of who your independent contractors are so we can utilize whatever process we come up with for independent contractors. So employee ID, they're an employee and they're already in Cornerstone. No employee ID, they're on the independent contractor list.
Okay, and part of that plan would be, I'm guessing, kind of the logistics of that, like how we'll handle it, but the logistics in terms of people needing the training kind of right away when we need to, because the people I'm talking about won't have an employee ID.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it'll be like if we have to at a residential program, and so then we call Delta T and they send somebody over to cover shifts or something like that.
Okay, so if we can get them in the Cornerstone, which is if we can orchestrate that, then we would treat them like employees for the sake of training and when they get scheduled for that. So if we can get them in Cornerstone, which we don't know yet, then it'll be a lot easier. If we can't get them in Cornerstone, we might have to come up with other options, which might be utilizing what some other companies have done as well, and which we know is an option for us to consider, which is developing a website that houses the e-learning specifically for those non-employees to access that website and take the training there.
Okay.
Now, we do have employees that are completely remote. So provided they can access the e-learning in whichever system, whether it's they can just completely take the training remotely. They will have to be savvy enough to kind of understand the user manual, the user guide, and the reference guides, and kind of self-pay, self-learn with the e-learning and the materials. They won't have the benefit of being in front of an instructor. But provided that they understand technology and can take e-learnings and process information that way, they can take all of their training virtually in the e-learning. So I see that there's some independent contractors that might not live in this region, so New York or something like that. They can take all of the trainings via e-learning. You don't have to pay to have them come in for an instructor-led portion of the class or to sit in the classroom physically. We can work so that they take all of their training via e-learning. Again, the other part that comes into play is around the supervision piece. So training is just but one main component of how people learn. But once people get the training, it'll be incumbent that whoever their supervisor is or point of contact, if they're an independent contractor, follows up to see that they're using the system correctly and properly. Because a lot of times the learning and the aha moments are going to happen once they actually start using the system. So it's good to have some additional resources kind of post-training that allow people to ask questions. So that's where maybe your super users come in, or your trainers are available, or the supervisors are knowledgeable so that they can help people once they actually start using the system. Training is not the end-all be-all of how people will actually start using the system well and learn it. Some things will happen on the job and as they come into different situations with the individuals they serve and support. Okay. And we can always come back to that, but we just want to make sure that you're clear on sooner rather than later. In terms of the digital literacy issues we know that exist, having an idea of the number of employees that need computer basics training has been crucial. I know you started that work, which is around addressing the division trainings can occur. You can start using some of that space to deliver computer basics training. This is a good preparation component for when the end users will actually take the e-learning training. So there are some things that should happen in advance that make them better prepared for the e-learning training of how to use the computer and or laptop. The last thing that we want to happen is that we as a company invest in new laptops and computers and someone doesn't know how to use them or somehow makes a mistake with them or does something that damages the computer or isn't good. So we want to make sure they know how to use a computer and all the systems and components. So we want to make sure you're addressing a plan training to those individuals that need it, which is why knowing how many computers you need for that training space is essential, because the first training that should be done is really around how they use the computer and get onto the system. For the individuals that you've identified to be trainers, it's likely that you can tap them to deliver the computer basics training. Happen on a much smaller scale, maybe the supervisor or unit director. If the program has an assistant unit director, maybe they deliver computer basics training, but we want to make sure that we get people really familiar with this before they. Now, a way that we can support you all in this is if you've identified trainers to deliver computer basics training, we can give them some resources on what they can cover during that training and how best to deliver it. We can also give them information on what they're training to get them prepared for the e-learning training. So making sure that individuals can get into Okta and then into all the applications that reside in Okta. MyRHD, Lawson, Cornerstone. Using that computer basics training time is an excellent opportunity to show people how to complete their timesheets in Lawson if they're not already doing that on their own. It's an excellent time to get them into Cornerstone and show them how to register for trainings. And there's a couple of e-learnings that will be in there that are available to all employees. We're available to all employees regardless of whether they're supervisors or not. We have a heat safety course that will be available to everyone, as well as a suicide prevention course coming as well. These are all e-learnings that can be kind of the pre-tests for individuals that need to kind of ramp up or learn some computer basic skills before they actually take an e-learning on an EHR system. Trainers get prepared to deliver that training, but we have to know who they are and when you're thinking about delivering training so that we can. Any questions on the computer basics training? Is that something you all think you could work to lead teams in delivering? And again, you don't have to love unit directory to kind of help with this effort. This is where roping in your divisional leadership teams and your unit directors would be appropriate. Start to work on this either at the program level, or a couple of programs can combine to address their computer basics training, but we want you all to kind of lead this effort. Concerns, comments? No? I can't hear anyone, so I can't tell if anyone's saying anything. Is that a yes?
We're
Okay,
good.
we can use chat. Okay. Northeast is good. Okay, I'm going to assume that that's a yes. If not, we can always talk about it offline when we do our divisional meetings. But thank you for weighing in via chat. Jesse, chat, so you asked about who will be creating usernames and passwords. You mean in I'll hold that one to the end of this presentation where I kind of circle back around to that. Okay, so we're good on hosting some of those virtual sessions, which will likely be via WebEx courses that'll be in Cornerstone, where we'll have you invite your trainers to attend those so they can learn what to deliver for those classes. We'll let you know when we'll have some of those sessions launching and running, and then you can share that as well. So that's what Brittany's working on right now. Okay, so the other training, you want to start to involve the program leaders and not necessarily in a formal management role. So any of your clinicians as well. So involving program leadership around developing and implementing the EHR training plan. So a few of us spoke before about programs or program clusters. You want to start to think about which programs have similar roles and service lines and how they can work collectively to develop a workforce management plan that might send a few people from one program and a few people from another program to the same training. So that if your classroom has 14 seats, you might get 7 from one program and 7 users from another program in that one class. If they're all DSPs, then the content is relevant. So you want to think about how some of the like programs, either regionally close, geographically close, or service line close, could be combined and partnered in delivering training or coordinating the training schedule on who's attending training and when. So you want to start reaching out to the unit directors now and letting them know about the status of the EHR training plan, because this is going to affect them as well. So they need to be involved in the process too. The goal is to really get their buy-in and their partnership in finalizing that plan. They're a crucial part of the execution of the training plan, and we don't want to leave them out. So while you're leading the effort, you want to include them as stakeholders in the process and get their thoughts and get their ideas so that they can feel part of it, because it'll help later when kind of the training is done. They're aware of what happened and they can reinforce stuff through supervision and on the job. You can also partner with them now in terms of delivering the computer basics training. Your divisional trainers might not yet be in a position to deliver the training more broadly. You might have to rely on the program leadership to do that. So think about how you can start roping them into the conversation around the delivery of computer basics training. You also want to determine a system for ongoing and consistent communication with the program leadership as well, and involve the EVP and the divisional leadership team in that communication so that everybody's on the same page. So you have 2 different stakeholder groups to manage, the divisional leadership groups and then the program leadership groups. So you want to make sure that they're roped in as well. Have you all started having any conversations with the unit directors or program leadership around the EHR training plan? few yeses in chat. Good. Any challenges that you're facing there that we can be helpful with? Okay. We can take some stuff offline, certainly. Yes, during the needs assessment, we asked about sustainability in training and onboarding. Okay. And we can talk about what that looks like going forward as well. So with the Eden Cornerstone, they're always available for an employee to retake it if they need to go to a specific topic or form. We did get feedback from a couple of other companies that launched EHR systems, and some best practices really are around making and focused on a specific form or topic so that it's bite-sized, so that someone doesn't have to sit through an hour-long e-learning where it's covering 8 different things, but to really make it a system they can take just what they need a refresher on. So those e-learnings are always there when new employees start. So in terms of onboarding, program leadership wants to think about when in the schedule of trainings that a new employee is to take, when do you have them take the trainings around the EHR, and how will that be structured? Because there will likely be kind of a different system utilized. We can be a little bit more helpful with you guys if you want to bring us in and sit down and work with the programs around what does this look like going forward. So if you're having some challenges there, let us know how and when we can meet with you all and collaborate with you and the program leadership to discuss a plan of action. But I'm sure that'll come a little ways down. We want to get through the initial ramp up of training first. Okay. All right, so the divisional trainers, we know securing the trainers' rules around serving as trainers. You want to get their buy-in and commitment. One organization that launched an EHR said that they had almost like a commitment sheet from the individuals that were helping with training, saying here's what I commit to doing, so that there was some level of agreement on their part and clarity around exactly what their role was. So you want to make sure that you have the commitment and the buy-in from the trainers in this process, because what we don't want to happen that we've seen is where some people say, sure, I'll do it, and then when it comes time to actually do it, they say, oh, I'm too busy, or I'd rather not. You want to make sure that you get their true commitment, not just from them, but that their supervisor is aware as well that this is part of their role in terms of helping with the initial training delivery for this rollout. And some of those individuals may have served as trainers for other courses and some may not. So it's always helpful if they can, as their next steps, do a little research around adult learning best practices, just in general. They won't necessarily be delivering the full end-to-end technical training unless that's what you think they should do, but the e-learnings will get at a lot of the technical pieces. So their role will be kind of in that blended approach. They'll have to be knowledgeable enough about the programs and the systems to speak to what will be in their trainer materials around how to deliver that class. So we're going to help give them the content, but it's good if they also have some of the other classroom management best practices and just some clarity around how adults learn. And so Brittany and I, in similar fashion, as we said before, are going to conduct train-the-trainer sessions where we help them get some adult learning principles and really know how to deliver kind of stand-up training, because they will deliver a portion of it. And we'll try to combine that during that time where they're here getting their train-the-trainer from NetSmart on the system. And again, as you've identified those trainers, if you want them to deliver some of the computer basics training from their perspective, this is also a good time for them to test out some of their skills in delivering the training. That way, they're not doing it for the very first time when it's the EHR training delivery. So if somebody says, okay, I have a couple of skills in doing training, or I've done a couple of trainings in the past, maybe they would be good to deliver the computer basics training. It allows them to refresh their skills and start being part of this overall process. To make sure that they're clear around how Cornerstone works and some of the content that's in there, we would encourage you to make them aware that they should have completed the Cornerstone User's Guide that's in the system. So that is an e-learning that really walks people through how Cornerstone works. They can also take that values-based supervision philosophy e-learning course. That gives them a way to look at two e-learning courses from two different standpoints. So the User's Guide is very linear, almost looks slide-based. The values-based supervision philosophy course is non-linear and much more self-directed and kind of free form. So we want people to be able to see that e-learnings come in very different fashions and be comfortable in both mediums of how e-learning can be delivered. The e-learnings that will be delivered for the avatar system will likely be more simulation-based, so they'll look and mimic the actual avatar system. So it won't quite look like the User's Guide or the Values-Based Supervision Philosophy e-learning, but the general principles of how e-learnings work in terms of navigation and where you click on things and how you process information is roughly the same. So it's good if the trainers at least have some experience in completing e-learnings personally. It'll make it easier when they're helping the learners in the classroom. So any efforts to secure divisional trainers. And as we know more closely when the trainer-trainer sessions will happen, we'll tell you to just start to collect all of that when we actually need that information. But we want to make sure you have it and can start to do some of the things listed. Okay, as the training plan, if you haven't already done so with the information that you've been gathering and some of the stuff we've asked for today, like the training location and space. So when you go into the training plan, there's a section called Training Management. Under that section are two subsections, Instructor Selection and Preparation Plan, and then Training Facilities. So start to put your information and documentation down in those two subsections. We recognize that you don't have all the information you need at this point to complete the entire plan, but you should have enough information to complete these two subsections. So we want you to start documenting that and making sure that that's listed and clear. So it's time to update those two subsections with the information you have so far. And again, if that's what you want to share and provide to your EVP, that's good. Any other information you have, you want to share with them as well. So they will likely be asked to speak to some of that on Friday. Okay, so Jesse asked a question earlier around usernames and passwords for the avatar system. Brittany and I had an opportunity to reflect on a lot of the content that we share with you all and a lot of the questions that we get from you all, which we think are very valid. And believe me, it's not easy to sit in a position and not always have answers when we know you need them. So we took that back to our EHR project team and we shared with them that it would be helpful if there were meetings around the EHR implementation specifically, where you all had a chance to ask some questions that aren't necessarily training-related questions, where we can also, as an EHR project team, give you information on the overall implementation of this effort, not just always training stuff, because there's much more that you need to know. So we're going to have somewhat of a slight change to our meeting approaches. You'll likely get invitations from EHR project team members, and then we're going to specify what those specific topics are about. Because, Jesse, while you ask a very valid question around who's setting up usernames and passwords for the system, I can't answer that because I don't have a question. An answer for that. So for me and Brittany, I know it doesn't seem logical at times, but that's not necessarily a key component of training, so it's not something that we have kind of readily available at our hands. Brittany might have more information because she's worked on this for a long time, but what we'd like to see happen is for other EHR project team members to get in front of you guys when they have specific topics to address. So Todd has come to a few of our meetings and talked about hardware, but in a way he's tagged onto a training meeting. We want to have some EHR implementation meetings, and for a portion we might cover training, for a portion we might cover overall implementation, for a portion we might cover hardware. But we want you to recognize training is just but a part of the overall implementation, a huge part, but just one part nonetheless. So Jamie, Hillary, or Deb, that team will be sending a meeting invitation soon around the EHR implementation. It's at that meeting where it's most appropriate to ask about the username and password piece. Now that we have that question, I think Hillary and Deb are on the line, and I'll also be able to share with Jamie. We can take that back and make sure we address that. But some stuff, if it's not quite in the training realm, I might not always have an answer for you. Brittany may not. We'll try to answer a lot of your questions as best as we can. We've also raised the issue with the larger team around the need for some communications to happen in the organization. That's an organizational readiness, organizational development component. It's not necessarily something that we can tackle because it's not related to training. So there's some silo-ness, and then there's some unity across what we're doing. But we want to make sure the right people are getting in front of you at the right time to get you the information when you need it. So it's a work in progress for all of us. We appreciate your patience in all of this, and we'll answer your questions as best we can. And when we don't know the answer, we'll tell you that. So unfortunately at this time, Jesse, I don't have an answer to the username or passwords, but we'll have the other team members address that. You'll still get some of those one-off divisional specific meeting invitations from Brittany and I around training, but we just want you to be aware that you might get other meeting invitations, and as an EHR project team, we'll try to coordinate when that's happening so it doesn't feel like it's overwhelming, but just recognize that you might get meeting invitations from different members of the team, and for as much as we can, we'll outline the agenda so you know what each meeting is focused on. On that kind of slight change to the meeting approach. All right, so we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. I know that was a lot of information to take in, but we recognize you've been doing a lot of this work already. We just wanted to sum it up for you in terms of where we are and where you should be in terms of completing the plan and working forward. Any last thoughts or questions, comments, concerns? You can put it in chat or unmute yourself.
This is the South. I think we're good. Thank you for giving us all these details.
You're welcome. Thank you. So are we able to use computer labs at our local community center or university for staff training? Absolutely, provided their systems meet the hardware specs, of which we can make sure that Mark and Todd provide that clarity on, as well as them having the internet connectivity and bandwidth. So we can talk about what that looks like if you're going to use their laptops and computer labs. Any other thoughts or questions? And again, we'll have our divisional specific meetings, so if you have some stuff there, we can definitely go over it at that time. If anything comes up between now and before Friday's executive meeting that you have for Brittany or I, feel free to reach out to both of us or either one of us, and then we'll just follow up with you all after the executive meeting, but we want to make sure you are clear that that's happening and more is coming. Good. Thank you all for all your hard work. We do communicate that to the executive team, and we appreciate your assistance and time in this entire process. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. you.